Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's third and final video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next 10 to 14 days for today's final video. Day 10 is going to take us to the 19th of November. And we'll be able to extend out beyond that with extended GFS and ECM ensembles over a couple of weeks. I'm going to have a look at CFS-V2 at the end of the video for the next 4 weeks. That's going to get us, of course, into the early part of December. I'll get on with that for you in a second. At the end of the video, we'll have a look at the ECMWF seasonal output as well. So the ECM forecast is in for this coming winter. I'll talk you through that as well in a moment, or video anyway. So just say that the first video was our 7 AM upload, and we've also released the ECMWF 30 days / 6 weeks forecast for the UK and for the rest of Europe too. So check out those 2 videos if you'd like to. But I'll tell you what's coming up on the channel tomorrow at the end of the video. Hope you're having a lovely Tuesday afternoon and evening, whenever you're watching this. Right, okay, let's start off Central England temperature then. So the CT is currently sitting at 8.2 degrees, which is just 0.2 of a degree above the rolling average for the 8th of November. So I think we can pretty much say that the first week of November came out about average, really. It's 0.2 of a degree above, but I think when you were within sort of a few points of a degree either side of average, you're basically about average. So I think we say the first week of November came out average. The second week of November is going to be significantly milder than average, so that CT will rise, probably I would have thought into the upper 8s to low 9s by the weekend, but we'll see about that. But definitely the second week of November will be a lot milder, is a lot milder. And then we wait and see where we go into the second half of the month. There are still ongoing hints, teases that we might get something a lot colder into the second half of the month. Nothing definitive, and I'll talk you through the data and the output in a moment. Right, so these are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. We're going to Kirkham today in Lancashire. This is a suggested location for this part of the video. If you'd like to have your local town or city featured within this part of the video, then please let us know through the comments, or you can email us at GavsWeatherVids@gmail.com. So at the moment we're starting off above average, of course, at Kirkham and across all parts of the country. The upper air temperatures will lower over the next day or so, and then lift back up again at the end of the week into weekend, reaching the peak sometime over the weekend when it will be really quite mild. Now into next week, we clearly have a cooling trend going on. We've been talking about this in the videos over the past few days. There is clearly cooling trend taking place. So as we go from the third week towards the final week of November, clearly we see a cooling trend. Clearly things are cooling down. There are some cold members potentially setting up through the last week to 10 days of November, including today's GFS midnight operational run. You're going to see that in a moment. It's not exactly a cold outlier, because there are several members of the GFS ensembles doing something similar, including actually the control run as well. When the operational run and the control run both go in the same direction, you have to, take notice of it, even if they're not particularly well supported. So there are several going in that direction, going colder, but, they are at the coldest end of the range, if you like. So these are the coldest ensemble members through here. These are the mildest ensemble members through here. Clearly, as it goes along, more and more of those GFS ensemble members are becoming colder. So I suppose we say that as we move towards the final week of November, that's probably when we have the greatest risk of something colder taking place. Precipitation-wise, it's going to be a lot of dry weather over the next week or so. We have got some rain around today. That's going to be fizzling out as it pushes south and east. But really, the next week or so going to be pretty dry. And then as it cools down, it looks like we might turn things more unsettled as well. If it gets cold, of course, there's a chance of some snow. In November, you can get snow even to more southern areas, actually, if it gets cold enough. Quite, not rare, but not common for snow across lowland southern England in November, but it does happen on occasion. But it depends how low the temperatures go, how much we cool things down. Temperature anomalies on the 9th to 17th of November are going to be above average, a mild average week coming up yet again in this very mild autumn. Precipitation anomalies from the 9th 17th of November are going to be drier than average. So broadly in the pattern that we've been in on and off through most of the autumn, with some variation here and there, which is largely mild and also relatively dry. Latest info map from earthandoldskool.net shows that we're bringing in a west or southwesterly wind, and so that's the reason that it's milder than average. Actually quite warm, really. The air is originating right away from the Azores and pushing northwestwards or northeastwards. So, yeah, very mild airflow today. Right, let's have a look at some tomorrow data then. This is how the UK Met Euro is looking for Friday. Low pressure started to move in from off the Atlantic on Friday. That will bring rain, particularly to northern and western areas. That low pressure weakens as it pushes across the country into weekend. And then once that gets out of the way, high pressure takes over. The UK Met has the high pressure taking over across Scandinavia, trying to bring in an easterly, which is not a particularly cold easterly, but would be cooler than the weather we've been experiencing just recently. And then as we go up towards a week out, so this is days 7 and 8, basically high pressure is in control of the weather. It's relatively mild ridge, but of course it's middle of November under high pressure, so if skies are clear, we could well start to see some frost and fog, I would have thought, beginning to set up, particularly so for England and Wales, maybe a rather milder west-southwesterly influence for Scotland. Right, so that's the UK Met done. This is how the GFS midnight run is looking. Again, high pressure is in control on Friday, but low pressure is moving in from off the Atlantic Ocean, or at least trying to. That low pressure actually sort of passes to the north of Scotland over the weekend. So into Saturday, most areas are still under the area of high pressure. So like as early as Friday, Saturday, there is disagreement within the model output, which is relatively unusual. The upshot is, anyway, whatever happens with that area of low pressure, by Sunday, high pressure is dominating the weather, trying to get towards Scandinavia. So, yeah, you know, we're still under high pressure there, a lot of dry weather. Again, if we start bringing in the air from more of a northeasterly direction, we might get rid of a lot of cloud and sort of start generating frost and fog. But basically, high pressure is well and truly in the ascendancy as we go into the early part of next week, dominating the weather, maybe with frost and fog early and late, but otherwise lots and lots of dry weather. Now we see hints of retrogression here, or shall I say retrogression, as we go into the middle of next week. So there's a high pressure over the country on Tuesday. By Wednesday, that high pressure is pulling out into the Atlantic and starting to retrogress up to Greenland. And there we go. By the time you get through the second half of next week, the GFS midnight run has that high pressure scooting all the way up to Greenland as a proper Greenland block. By the way, and begin to introduce a very cold northerly wind. Now, the central pressure of that is going up to something like 1070 millibars. So that is a very, very intense area of high pressure setting up over Greenland there. And with the trough plunging through Scandinavia, the upshot is that we begin to pull in much cold winds from the north. And we go into a proper northerly blast by day 10. Which is Friday the 19th of November. Real long fetch northerly. If you follow the isobars back, the air is originating from Svalbard and is plunging down western side of Europe with a high pressure again centred around Greenland and Iceland and in the North Atlantic, as the upper air temperature showing that properly cold air is being brought southwards on those northerly winds. America often running into a prolonged cold spell then. This is the 20th of November, just beyond day 10, with high pressure still blocking in the Atlantic. Low pressure to east. The wind's actually turning northeasterly. So that will start to bring in snow showers to northern and eastern parts of the country. Properly cold with the upper air temperatures too. And we remain cold into the extended range as well. Winds continuing from a northeasterly direction. Trough of low pressure over much of western and central Europe. High pressure blocking in the Atlantic. Winds in from an east or northeast direction. Keep an eye on the area of low pressure here around Greenland and Iceland. Look what happens with that low. It begins to drop in as we go to the 22nd of November. There's the low starting to drop in towards northern Scotland. And then that low sort of plunges through the country as we go through the 22nd of November. That's coming into cold air ahead of it. And, of course, has cold air behind it. And so, although there would be a warm sector with that, it's the kind of thing that might deliver a snow event. no event there potentially showing up on the GFS midnight run. The low pressure then moves southwards into France. High pressure returning behind it. Winds remaining from a cold northeasterly direction. And then finally, at the very end of the GFS midnight run, the high pressure begins to slip southwards, and we start to allow in a slightly less cold or milder westerly wind. But that's a very cold setup, you know, from the GFS midnight run. But bear in mind, on the ensemble, it's down here. It is with the coldest members. It's perhaps not an outlier because there are, you know, a few others that are doing something similar. But clearly it is at the very coldest end of the range, so not well supported by the GFS ensembles. This is how the 6Z is looking. So once more, we've got this area of low pressure trying to come in from off the Atlantic on Friday. How much influence that has remains to be seen. But the GFS output, anyway, looks like it wants to maintain a lot of anti-cyclonic influences into the weekend. Starting to build the heights towards the northeast, turn the wind into the east or the northeast. So that would start to bring in probably cooler air, not particularly cold, but cooler air would start to infiltrate into the area of high pressure through the weekend and into the open next week, with an increasing risk of overnight frost, I would have thought, if skies are clearing. But the main idea is that high pressure remains well and truly dominant right way into the early part of next week. Then the high pressure begins to pull out to our west, similar to what the midnight GFS run was doing, but not far enough west or north to bring in most northerly winds. And so with the 6Z, the northerly is actually going into Scandinavia. We're just on the periphery of it. The high pressure does not go far enough north or west to allow that northerly in. Scandinavia gets a northerly though, and northeastern Europe, it turns very cold up there. But with the upper air temperature, you just see that by daytime we're on the periphery of it. We're generally still within the milder upper air temperatures, with the coldest upper air temperatures to our north and east. Then the high pressure sort of sits around the country again as we go through the third week of November, but it does eventually go north. So by the time you get through, so it's delayed it, but it does eventually get there with the GFS 6Z. Again, sends high pressure to Greenland, lifts the heights up to 1,075 millibars, drops a trough into Scandinavia. It's already there anyway, but another trough sort of drops into Scandinavia. And this time we open the door again to the northerly wind. This time it's on the 23rd of November that the northerly sets in. So it's pushed it back, but it does get there. And we go off and running again into what looks like quite a prolonged cold or very cold spell of weather with an increasing risk of snow. That's as far as we get to with GFS 6, which is Thursday the 25th of November. So the GFS is definitely flirting with something. It's, you know, flirting with some sort of blocking feature and colder weather. Whether it's something or whether it's nothing remains to be seen. Could be something, could be nothing. It's not all that well supported by the GFS or by the GFS ensembles though at this point. So caution is needed. GM looks like that. So again, differences as early as Friday with the placement of this area of low pressure, which is quite interesting and a little bit unusual to have such disagreement at 72 hours. The GM is much further southwards with that low, and so will bring an increasing risk of wet weather across the country. The low pressure is into the North Sea on Saturday, turns the wind again into that cold northerly. Then high pressure builds behind that low, and we do turn things into a, you know, do bring in a cooler northeasterly with the GM. And under the high pressure, there will be an increasing risk of frost through the weekend into part of next week. That ridge carries on through to the middle of next week, and then the ridge breaks and we break it down and move south. So by day 10, definitely no northerly with the GM. Actually, we're bringing in an unsettled and relatively mild west or southwesterly, with low pressure running in along the jet stream. So up to day 10, the GM does not bring any sort of northerly into Northern Europe, actually. And then the ECM, again, further samples with that area of low pressure on Friday. So that brings perhaps a greater chance of wet weather across the country Friday through Saturday. The low pressure eventually gets out of the way. And then 7 days or other model output, when the low pressure goes, high pressure then takes over, builds up towards Scandinavia. So we begin to turn wind into an easterly, which is not a cold easterly, but it's probably cooler than the weather we've had over recent days. Lots of high pressure continuing into the early part of next week, continuing to ridge through the country. Probably an increasing risk of frost and fog under that ridge. Then, second half of next week, we break down the ridge and we turn things unsettled. Still mild up to day 10 with the ECM. Only thing with that is that it's probably starting to raise the heights a little bit to the north. So, and it is sort of pushing the trough through Scandinavia. So the ECM is not all that far away, actually, from bringing in some colder weather. You've got to get rid of this high pressure around Spain and Biscay. You have got to reach out northwards. But the ECM is sort of chart that could go in the direction of colder weather a day or two further on. That's how the upper air temperatures look. The -5 Celsius iceberg sort of poised just to the north of Scotland. We're still quite mild up to that point. But ECM is a kind of chart that might evolve into something colder, actually. Wouldn't rule it out. This low pressure would be very important. If that low pressure was to run in along the jet stream, then that would just maintain the mild westerlies. If that low pressure sort of goes up here, up towards southern Greenland, that will bring in some milder, warmer southerly winds, and warm air advection will probably allow this high pressure to push northwards and send the trough southeastwards. So the ECM is interesting. Day 10, and it's a kind of chart that could go in either direction. Very complicated pattern. This is a precipitation forecast based on that ECM run from Tometeo.com. There will be light rain and drizzle over the next few hours across England and Wales, but a lot of dry weather really. High pressure in control. Later on in the week turns wet and windy in the north and west via that area of low pressure that we're unsure the track over. That low pressure then sort of moves away to the east anyway as we get into the weekend. High pressure begins to take over again, and it turns drier. Winds go back into the east. Dry really through the open next week, and then maybe a little bit more unsettled towards day 10. Some wet weather sort of strung out through central part of the country. I have to say for the south and east, there is a lot of dry weather over the next few days, though. These are the options on the table within the ECM Ensembles Day 4. Day 10 gets us to the 19th of November. 13 members of the ECM Ensembles are looking wet, windy and mild with low pressure in off the Atlantic and westerly winds, high pressure to our southwest. Then we have 11 just here that have us under a area of high pressure over Scandinavia. We have an area of high pressure over Scandinavia and are bringing like a east to southeasterly wind. That's probably relatively mild with the upper air temperature, but it could be cold on the surface. We have 10 with a trough low pressure through Scandinavia, ridge of high pressure to our west-southwest. That's trying to get wind into the north, probably sort of west-northwesterly with that. We have 9 that have high pressure. That one includes the control of the operation run, by the way. We have 9 just here that have high pressure just to our west, low pressure to the east. That's probably the coldest option. That would be bringing in a proper northerly, I think. And then 8, again, with high pressure more or less over the country. Low pressure is up to the north. So that's going to be mainly dry and relatively mild with that one. In 2 weeks' time, these are the options that we've got. This gets us to the 24th of November. 15 members of the ECM Ensembles with high pressure to the south and low pressure to the north. Winds are flat and westerly. That's going to be quite mild. 11 with high pressure out to our west, low pressure to our east. That's going to be drier but colder. Winds in from the north-northeast. 10 with high pressure over the country and towards Scandinavia. Winds are easterly with that. Could be quite cold. 8 doing something similar to the GFS midnight run, showing proper blocking in the North Atlantic up towards Greenland with low pressure over and to the east of the country. Again, that brings in a chance of cold, maybe even really very cold for the time of year. Northeasterlies, and then 7 flat and westerly and generally quite mild. So it's all up the grabs. It's all up the grabs for the third and final week of the month. Whoops, I want to go there. CFSV2 looks like this. It's the 500 millibar heights breaking down into week periods. The first week period takes us from the 9th to 15th of November. The coming week dominated by high pressure, lots of dry weather, and pretty mild as well. Week 2 will be the 16th to 22nd of November. The high pressure end pulls out to our west. Low pressure digs in to northern and east Europe. Cold for northern and eastern Europe. We're on the periphery of that. So it turns a little bit cooler probably, but not overly cold and still with a lot of dry weather associated with it. Week 3 is the 23rd to 29th of November. Low pressure is to our north. High pressure pulls out into the middle of the Atlantic. Winds go northwest, southeast with jet stream as well. So that's more unsettled and probably a bit on the cool side, actually. And then finally, week 4 will be the 30th of November to 6th of December. High pressure then is over eastern and northeastern Europe and sort of sending a ridge to the west. So that's the sort of thing that could bring some frost and fog and that kind of weather. Overall, it's not a particularly cold chart. We're not bringing in the wind from the north or from the east, but with the wind coming off the continent, I suppose you could get some frost and fog with that. Just have a look at the ECMWF finally for this winter. It has updated. So this is the mean sea level pressure anomaly from the ECMWF for the winter itself, December, January, February. Just looks rather unsettled really, with low pressure across Western Europe and in the North Atlantic. Not much there to suggest anything particularly cold. There's a little bit of high pressure up here though, and the Azores high is displaced further away from us towards the eastern side of America. So that will perhaps allow the jet stream to go northwest southeast. So some cold snaps could be possible with that, but overall with a mean sea level pressure on it doesn't look particularly exciting. And actually later on in winter, probably reverting to more of a westerly type pattern. This is mean sea level pressure on for January, February, March. Low pressure to the north and high pressure around here, and that sort of sends the winds in from the west. We can break this down month by month. I saw that, but you can't see this at ECMWF.int website itself, but this was being shared on Twitter yesterday. My good friend Dwayne shared this with me, so thank you, Dwayne, for sharing this with me. This is the mean sea level pressure on a month by month basis. So this is how November looks, first of all. So for November, the ECMWF seasonal is sort of pulling the heights out into the Atlantic. Low pressure through here. Quite a cold signal, actually, for northern Central East Europe. We're on the periphery of that, as usual. But, you know, a chance of some colder snaps, particularly later on in the month. Now, this is December, which looks rather anticyclonic with the mean sea level pressure anomaly. So December suggesting quite a bit of high pressure then. Mainly dry, but potentially rather cold. That flips as we get into January, and we set up like low pressure right over the top of the UK and Ireland. Now you'll notice in January there is a lot of blocking as well, particularly centred around Svalbard. So that, you know, it's a kind of thing that might turn into a surprisingly wintry month. Notice how far away from us the Azores high is pulled. That's pulled right way over towards the east side of America. So I think you've probably got to raise heights a little bit more here around Greenland and Iceland, but that is not all that far from being a very cold and wintry pattern for January, actually. So within sort of those 3 monthly anomalies, there is actually some quite interesting stuff going on, actually. And January could well have the potential for some really quite cold and wintry weather. It all then flips around into that milder westerly flow for February. So this is February's mean sea level pressure anomaly again, low pressure around Iceland, Greenland, and much more of a flatter westerly type pattern. The Azores high is still pulled away from us, though, even in February. So although milder in February, because the Azores high has less of an influence, you still wouldn't rule out the chance of some colder pattern, you know, some colder inches, some colder patterns at time. But notice the northern blocking sort of disappears in February. So although the 3 monthlies, you know, this one January, February, March, and this one December, January, February, although they didn't look particularly interesting, when you drill down into month by month detail, you know, there is some quite interesting patterns at work. Even in December, you wouldn't rule out a chance of some easterly winds, actually, particularly if that high pressure was to go just a little bit further northwards. You wouldn't be ruling out a chance of bringing in some easterly winds in December, and then January, you know, with the blocking signal and the trough of low over the west of Europe, January could turn into a surprisingly wintry month, actually, there. February does look more straightforwardly mild and westerly, but still, even then, the Azores high is pulled out a long way from us, and so cold snaps would definitely be possible even into February. So food for thought, anyway. And, you know, it just remains to be seen, really, how this sort of pans out over the coming few months. But yeah, we'll keep you informed, obviously. And the first thing to focus on is whether we do get this cold snap in the second half of November or not. Will we get a November flip? We shall wait and see. Right, that's it for your videos for today, Ben. So just say that coming up tomorrow, we're going to have a 7 AM upload. We're going to have USA forecast. There'll be a 10 to 14 day again tomorrow. And don't forget, tomorrow evening, 7 PM, we will have the third instalment of our Christmas countdown. So the third Christmas update on the way tomorrow at 7. That's PM, of course, not AM. Right, so you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you tomorrow. But for this one, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.